Hi there, my name's Ben and I like to read. Today we're going to be reviewing a book called The Illustrated Book of Myths as retold by Neil Phillip, and this is wonderfully illustrated by Nilesh Mistry. Now I don't have any background on the author or the illustrator, however what I can say about this book is that it is a compilation of multiple different myths from around the human history and around the world. So it gives you a really nice sort of variety of the different creation myths, or the myths, which tell the interactions between, gods and people, or fertility and cultivation, or the end of the world, or anything like that. But essentially, what I like about this mostly is that or what I should say, the thing that I like the most about it is that the incredible amount of just how even it is. It's not Norse heavy, it's not Celtic heavy, it's not Greek heavy, it's not Polynesian heavy. It's actually got a really well balanced array of different cultures, and what's remarkable to me is how similar a lot of them are, especially when you get into the concept of how most cultures have a trickster god. So let's say the Norse have Loki, the Polynesians have Maui, the Ashanti, they have Kwakwanaanse, and it's nice to see how some stories kind of remain universal, or at least there are certain cultural constants in between people. So I think that's really, really cool. I was given this book when I was a child, and I periodically reread the myths ever since. I think that myths are very, very important. Reading fiction and poetry is important as well, but myths are something that, again, you have these are the stories that have been passed down throughout history. So again, like a intergenerational game of telephone, obviously they change. It's not perfect, and in fact, a lot of these, before being put to paper, a lot of cultures had a oral tradition of passing things down, passing the stories down. And these people who were in charge who were the knowledge keepers, were very, very again, they were very well respected. That's why we've lost a lot of Celtic myths, for example, because especially with regards to the Druids were these. Even though one of the reasons why we don't know a whole lot about them is because the majority of their knowledge was passed down orally. So there's very, very few written records, and I mean, you can still see this in a couple of other cultures today. I would say that while it seems an inefficient way of doing this, it's very, very practical as well. It doesn't necessarily require an alphabet. It doesn't require, you don't have to worry about losing it per se. Let's say, if you have, for example, the stone tablets of, with your culture's creation myth on there, and let's say, it gets stolen, or it gets broken or something, and then no one remembers it, well, then you've essentially lost that story. Whereas if you have someone who is dedicated as the story keeper, the storyteller of this of your community, then in that case, yes, it all depends on that person's memory, but they can also add their little twist to it. They can tweak it. They can use their creative processes and their expression and their unique expressions in order to develop the story further, and it almost becomes a living, breathing organism in that sort of a sense. It's almost kind of like how, this is going to be a little bit of a tangent, so bear with me. It's almost like how Kanye West initially released The Life of Pablo. He mentioned in the beginning that he was going to continually update it on the streaming service, because again, he wanted it to be a continuously evolving, a continuously organic form of art. something that does change with time, something that does change based on the subjective, on the subjective nature of our world. And I think that that concept is, it was, equal parts lauded and criticized for being, quote unquote, a little bit too radical. If anything, it's very, very ancient, because again, going back to the fact that most of our myths and most of our stories throughout human history were handed down orally, where it wasn't 100% word for word, because there could have been some personal embellishments. The person who was telling you this story would tell it with their own little twist. And I mean, I'm sure, let's say even a more modern example would be, or a more personal one at that, if you go and speak to your grandparents and they have, let's say if you ask your grandmother and your grandfather separately about this one event, the story, the overall story is the same, but they're not going to tell it the same way. They won't use the same words. They won't use the same expressions. They won't have the same cadence. So in essence, you're getting two different things from the story. So I think that's sort of the beauty of myths. But anyway, I digress from the actual book itself. It's really, really good. I found myself drawn more so to the especially to the West African stuff. So they're like, the story of how Chukwu, the Great Spirit of the Igbo, created the world, and he sent a messenger, a wild dog, to go and tell the people, okay, well, this is what you do if someone, if someone passes away, this is how you're supposed to bury them or this is what you're supposed to do in order for them to come back to life. But the dog got lazy and sent the sheep instead. And then by the time the sheep got there, the sheep said, oh, okay, he forgot the message, and he fouled it up, and he said, okay, well, instead of laying the body out flat and sprinkling ashes on it, you have to bury the body first, and then just wait, and everything will be okay. So naturally they do that. The dog comes, gets there along with Chukwu and says like, whoa, what the hell? What's going on? Like, we told you, this is how we told you how to do it. You're not supposed to bury the person. You're supposed to wrap them up, keep them on top of the ground, and sprinkle them with ashes. And they said, well, look, we were told first that we're burying the bodies, so we're doing that forevermore. And I love that myth in particular. I also really was a huge fan of the Kwakunanse, his barter for the sky god stories. So essentially, where he's the trickster spider. He goes up, flexing, and he's like, all right, I want to have your stories. Your stories are really cool. What's your price? I'll pay it. So he says, okay, I need you to get the spirit of the forest. I need you to get the this crazy hornet, these crazy hornet swarm, this python, and this leopard. And if you bring me all four of those, then you can have my stories. So he's like, all right, bet, let me go do it. And I don't know, there's something about it, like, especially when I read it the first time, I was like, oh man, this is really cool. But then actually getting to speak to someone, because it is, at least the story is classified here as a West African Ashanti myth. So right now in present day Ghana, to hear someone over there tell it as well, you just get so much more from it as well. And I mean, it's something. It's one of those stories that, again, has stuck with me for a while, because you can take these characters and, I mean, essentially, yeah, it's a story, right? But, and I mean, it's not even in a religious sort of a sense where you derive morality of it, or how most people do it these days. They watch either like Spider-Man, or they read the comics, and with great power comes great responsibility and all that. It's not necessarily like that, but the reason why myths like this work so well, why myths in general work so well, is because sometimes you need to put things in a fictional setting in order to effectively communicate a concept, because it makes it more fun. When something's more fun and you're playful, it's easier to absorb that information, to absorb those lessons. And again, this isn't the same for for a lot of people. In fact, I'll probably do another video that's not a book review, expounding on this further in the near future, actually. But that said, getting back to the book, really, really enjoyed it. I think this is great for all ages. I gotta say, don't skip out on it. Even if you're not the biggest fan of mythology, even if you think fiction and stories, ain't nobody got time for that. No, like, you can. They're short. The illustrations are absolutely beautiful. Nilesh Mistry does a fantastic job. Neil Phillip has a beautiful way of summarizing the myths themselves in clear language without it being, too overdrawn. There are some exceptions. There are some really, really long myths and stories, but it's something for, if you want to reconnect with with an ancestral culture, or learn about a new one, or even just to get a fresh take on on a story that has been passed down through the ages. Pick this book up. I guarantee you will not be dissatisfied. So if you've read any particular myths, actually this would be a great time to ask the question: what are your favorite myths? Let me know down in the comments below. If I've read them, obviously we can talk about that. If I haven't, I've got something to read. But again, if you haven't really delved into the realm of mythology, I'd highly suggest that you do. It's great to let your mind run and play, almost a little bit like poetry. But yeah, aside from that, let me know what your thoughts were in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching.